Hello and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on all matters property, supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every Sunday from 10 a.m. on YouTube, Facebook and our website propertymatterstv.co.uk. And if you're watching on the website, don't forget to hit that Google review button right there on the homepage. And you can also leave your comments on the comments section on social media, wherever you're watching us today. And if you'd like to email us, the address is hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. Property Matters is also available as a podcast on all of these major platforms, and I'm pleased to say we're also live on Dilsa Radio as well, which is great news. So let's take a look at today's stories with our property expert, of course, Joe Joshi. Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to all of our listeners and our viewers, of course. Being on a Sunday morning, I'm sure some of you are still having a nice lie-in.
Yeah, absolutely. Easter Sunday, there's a thing, getting up and working on Easter Sunday. Mind you, we did Christmas Day, so this is an easy one. This is a walk in the park. Excuse me. So anyway, let's just take a look at our first story today. And I cannot believe the headline that I'm reading in the news this week, the property news this week. UK housing model is broken, says none other than Michael Gove. The assessment came in a recent collection of essays by conservative think tank Bright Blue, in which Gove emphasised the urgent need for more homes to be built to increase accessibility to home ownership. With comments first reported by the Times newspaper, Gove wrote, "We desperately need more homes to bring ownership within reach of many more people." In another essay in the report, Conservative Sean Bailey said he criticised the lack of progress in house building over the past 2 decades, stating that over the last 20 years, the supply of good quality housing was completely failing to keep pace with demand, causing ever-increasing house prices. And in their 2019 manifesto, of course, Joe, they promised to build 300,000 homes in England every year by the mid-2020s. However, the government has since faced pressure on the issue of housing, and with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak saying that the target is rather advisory than mandatory. And Robert Jenrick, who we've mentioned many times on this show, has warned the government will miss its target by a country mile. So why do you think they've suddenly come out and admitted this now when they're supposed to be fixing the thing?
Well, you know, what they say, where the best form of defense is to attack, isn't it? So here we are just pushing the whole thing on something else completely. But the government has definitely failed to meet any targets, and of course are responsible to a large extent for the housing crisis that they say, and as Gove says, is broken. Is broken because they've been in government now for some time. The targets are just not being met. The demands are always very, very high for property. And moreover, it's not just general property, it's the affordable section that is just not being reached. People are not being able to get onto the housing market ladder, housing property ladder. The first run of it has just not been possible, let alone enough rentable properties, lettable properties that they can actually, go and have reasonable rents to pay to be able to have a roof over their own head. And so thus, as Gove says, it's a model that is broken. It's a model that is broken because they're not actually, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, of course, they are not looking at what is in the cupboard. And I've said this many a times before on our show, that they've got plenty of stock that they just don't seem to replenish themselves and keep looking over the garden fence to see what else they can do, when actually they need to come in and take stock of what they've actually got. And there's lots and lots and lots and lots of properties throughout the country that the government owns or has control over through the councils or the local authorities or through the housing association, all bodies that are partly government run, and have all these properties that are just not maintained, not dealt with, not put back out so people can actually have them to rent or to buy, simply because they keep thinking that they've got to build more houses and they've got to do other things, when actually I think they will be quite shocked as to what is sitting in their cupboards, which they're not spending. They spend money, Paul, on silly things, simply to kind of try and, as somebody said before, and will say it again, is to be sort of just winning votes, but they're not going to win votes by doing what they're doing. They're going to, not get the trust in. And this comment about the UK housing model is broken fundamentally because they've been in charge for some time and they haven't been able to fix it. And every time, I mean, I think was it some weeks ago we reported that we'd had something like 20 housing ministers in the last God knows how many
Yeah, that's right.
years. It's just they don't know. They just give somebody the job to come and do, which they don't understand. They don't. They don't really want to. They actually, the truth is, I don't think they really want to sort it out because it's a good problem for them, and it creates jobs. It creates more work. It creates all sorts of things, and I just don't think that they actually want to fix it. But if they do want to fix it, I don't think that it's too difficult to fix.
Well, the Bright Blue report, Joe, comes out with 60 policy recommendations. Amongst those is obviously increasing the number of social homes, no surprising, a decentralising planning power, which they were going to do, but they seems to have been brushed under the carpet, creating a community right to buy scheme, and encouraging the use of brownfield sites. Well, I suppose they're doing that to some extent already, but nobody really wants to overlook the railways, but it doesn't seem to be already, or some other industrial complex, but seems to be that's where they're building now. But the interesting one was this community right to buy. What do you understand that to mean, Joe?
Well, the community right to buy, I mean, in terms of built properties and, of course, land and areas that they could afford to take back in, are perhaps things like churches, church areas, community halls, military halls, government, Air Force places. These are things that are community properties, sites, which I don't know if you've recently seen, and I'm sure some of our viewers and listeners would have seen, that the government is looking to rehouse, immigration people, asylum seekers onto an airfield because they think that again, that is as stupid and as silly a circumstances that anybody could come up with when they could actually use those areas in much different ways than trying to put up prefab cheap things just to rehouse people out of hotels. So I think the community scenario is that they're not utilizing what they have got. Again, I'll go back to my phrase at the beginning. They're not looking in their own cupboard. They've got things in their own cupboards that they could actually utilize more effectively and probably get better planning and grant themselves planning to do the social housing.
It's interesting, actually. One of the commentators says that neither the Tories or the Labour Party have tried to reverse the negative effects of right to buy since the 1980s, which is the true source, in their opinion, of the housing crisis, when Margaret Thatcher sold all those council houses to people who then sold them on at great profit and then went on a cruise around the world. And now they're owned by slum landlords in the centre of London, as we saw on Panorama a few weeks ago, where they turned a 3-bedroom property into a house, an HMO of 6 people. And the landlord was taking 900 and something pounds a month off each of them. And when they took I don't know if you saw it, but when they took the lady back to show her the property, she could not believe there were 6 people living in her house where there used to be 2 of them. And, when you look at situations like that, then you can see how broken the situation is. So he said that he reckons it's going to cost about £125 billion over 10 years to solve the problem. And whilst that seems like a lot of money, it's a drop in the ocean compared to what was spent on COVID, for example.
Yes, I mean, COVID and the housing crisis are 2 separate issues. But of course, COVID was something that we nobody actually knew was coming around the corner. I mean, if they did, we didn't know about it until it was literally at our doorstep. And then all of a sudden we had to act on it. And not only did the government pay heavily for it, but we all did in many ways. Ways that some people will never ever recover from, losing members of family, not being able to see family and all that other stuff that went on. So COVID was different. But housing market wise, I think that they just haven't, got it right. They keep looking at how they're going to change that. But actually, my view is that they can actually do a lot with what they've already got. And actually, that will be more vote winning. You can stop, I don't know, 100 people in a town and ask them, and they'll tell you that they know of a property in their street that has been boarded up for some time, whether it's a property that has been repossessed by a mortgage company, or whether it's a property that was repossessed or for some reason by the local council. They then don't use the resources that they've got at their fingertips to go and get that house refurbished and tidied up and cleaned up as quickly as possible and put another family in it. It sits there for months, if not years, before someone says it's more than my job's worth to XYZ. But they continue to look at the next one and go, oh, well, we need more housing, we need more people, we need more social housing. When actually, you're absolutely right in bringing forward that the Margaret Thatcher days of selling council houses was probably the beginning of these crises. But they still have a lot of houses, Paul, and flats and blocks of flats that are there. I mean, I know in my local area, I could walk the streets and tell you a number of properties that have been sitting there with steel grates on them to stop vandalism and to people going in there and so forth. And actually, there's a block of 4 that I can come to my mind straight away, and it's been like that for about 2 years, maybe 3 now. And it belongs to the council. And I just don't get why they can't send somebody in there and go, right, let's get this sorted out. And we'll deal with whatever the issues are separate, because, the council have the right for compulsory purchase order. It's called CPO, compulsory purchase order. So if someone else is in charge of that and they're not making use of it, they can actually go and then say, well, we're going to actually purchase this or take this back and handle it and deal with it and so forth. I don't think that any of them are capable of doing it. It's not just the major government, but equally the local authorities are just as at fault, because they don't recycle what they've actually got either.
There was a programme last week, I think it was, on BBC Two, Simon Reeves returned to Cornwall, and it highlighted another element of this that I'll just avail you of if you didn't see the programme, talking about obviously the housing in Cornwall, talking about how many of the homes are actually left empty off-season because the people don't live there, and as their main sort of source of housing. Employed people using food banks, never mind that they're unable to get a job that pays a decent wage. The young couple there having to leave their rental accommodation as the owner wished to sell and had no alternative accommodation available for a family of 5. And they're having to live in a single room in one of the local hotels. A lot of the hotels closed because they can't afford to pay for the extortionate energy commercial prices. And the local council, this is the best bit, refusing planning for 29 affordable homes that would only be used by locals because other locals blocked it. Just seems to defy belief, doesn't it? No wonder we're in a mess.
It's completely bizarre when you think that, people are screaming out for housing. The local authority own the site and put in an application, and the neighbours of those properties objected to those, and yet those neighbours are the first ones to complain that there are homeless people sleeping in their streets, and that then deters people to visit those towns. What people don't realise to a large extent, Paul, and you've heard me say this a million times, is the first impressions are the lasting impressions, and anyone that visits an area, however it's presented, is decided in their mind whether they want to be there or not be there. And Cornwall, and this is a completely off-the-wall subject now, but Cornwall, due to Panorama, is a very nice area. And yes, I understand it's a seasonal tourist situation, and people have been buying properties there and doing Airbnb during the holiday seasons and do very well, and the rest of the time they're lying empty. And because of the letting laws and all the other laws that of now are in or are going to come in, nobody wants to put anybody in their properties, so they lie empty. Of course, people have to go to hotels, and even those hotels recently, as you would have heard recently in the government has turned around and said that the hoteliers want their hotels back, because they took occupation of all the hotels, or as many as they could, spending as much as £7 million per day on covering the costs of asylum seekers in those hotels. But the hotel and the tourist industry now trying to get back on its feet, wants the hotels back so that they can actually let it out to good people that want to come and have a holiday here, and a rental market. So the next thing we're going to have is we're going to have these people going into um, blocks of properties, or as recently, as clever as they have, we're going to now, stick on two airfields and put prefabricated cheap houses with basic information, basic quality, so that people can be housed in them. I mean, it's just bizarre. The whole thing is not thought out at all. And I think Gove is completely off the wall by saying it's broken. It's broken because they've broken it. And they've got people in their own system that don't understand how to fix it.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I mean, there is certainly enough comment in this sphere about the treatment of landlords by the current government, because obviously, not least the fact that in 2017 they changed the rules on taxation. So the daft thing is that if you own a commercial property or if you have a hotel, you can set your expenses against your costs. Your expenses against your profits, but you can't do that if you're a private landlord. So there does seem to be this determination to continue, because I think personally that they believe it's a vote winner to have a go at landlords. But of course, as it says here, 56% of landlords have already got themselves out of the property game because there's just no money anymore. So that's just pouring more wood on the fire, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what they're doing to private landlords is disastrous. To be honest with you, if you want to use that title, the UK housing model is broken. They continue to do that with the landlords. It is not going to be broken. It's going to be completely shattered. It'll be back on the ground, because as these people that do buy to let and want to make properties and make an investment come out of it, where are the government going to store all these people that are no longer going to be able to have a landlord that's going to rent to them? Where are they going to put them? Probably get another couple of airfields and stick a few more cabins on there. Porter cabins are probably going to be where they're going to be. It's completely. In fact, I wouldn't mind a one-to-one with Gove if he's listening by any chance. That to tell him that what, you're not leveling up at all. In fact, you need to get a proper spirit level, because you're totally off the wall at the moment.
Well, they're busy putting funds into the north, obviously, as it's coming near to an election time, one would argue as well. But talking about the north, there is the suggestion here, of course, that actually, if you can't afford a property in London, then don't live in London. There's plenty of 2 and 3 bed houses in Doncaster for 90,000, and they are affordable. So, what's your response to that argument, Joe?
Well, people have places of work and family connections and all the other things that matter to them. It's not always just about roof over their head. But if it means that they've got to start somewhere, of course they need to maybe go out to come back in. It's very difficult, but that's the process. On the other hand, one could say that every time somebody says, well, it's going to be, and I'm not having a pop at the asylum seekers, but if every time somebody says, I need a place and the government's got to give me that, maybe the government should invest in those £90,000 properties in the north and say to those people that are applying that that's where we're going to send you. So off you go. There's a house in Doncaster, wherever it is, that is got 3 bedrooms, a family home, and that's where we can send you. They can actually drive that, and then it's a case of Hobson's choice. You can't say you haven't been offered it, but if you have been offered it, then that's what you've got to do to go. But if you continue to say, I'm here to appease you, anyone is going to say, well, actually, I'd like to live around the corner from mine. It's about the same story about the chap in town many years ago who, basically wouldn't accept a certain number of rooms in a house because he had, I don't know, a number off the wall, 35 kids or something, and he wanted a house that is going to accommodate his family and 5 wives and 35 children or something. And the government was paying them £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 a month in rent because he wanted it there. Now, if they'd actually sort of said to him, look, pack your bags and take your kids to the north of England and we'll find you one over there, then maybe that's what he would do. But because we keel over, because we just appease the people, then everybody wants to live in the right area where they want to be. They want to be close to their family and they want to be in the areas that they were using. So, they've got to take a stance. If they want to change this model and they want to, be seen to doing the right thing by a lot of people that will vote for them, then they've got to start to take a stance and saying, you know what, we'll help you fix it, but it's got to be moved. You've got to move. They keep telling everybody they want to invest in the north, but nobody wants to go to the north. There's nothing wrong with the north, but it's away from their daily bread. It's away from their work. It's away from their family. It's away from their connection, away from their doctors. The things that they've got used to. And, you try and tell somebody that you've got to move, and they might move of their own accord. But if it's a needs must, and the authorities have got to do what they've got to do, and they have been told to provide, then they've got to tell them that you can go there. So it's a bit like a job, isn't it? People say, oh, I've got to go to the job centre and I'll claim to the job centre because I've got to go there every week. But really, they could probably do that same job elsewhere. But why would they want to stay there? Kids' schools are there, their families there. There's lots of other reasons why they don't want to shift that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you look at the first-time buyers, who are the other people that are particularly affected by this situation, this broken housing system. If you think about it, typically they're likely to go into a flat, but of course they're blighted by archaic leasehold laws. We've now got a situation, of course, where if you're looking at buying a flat, because the fact that builders decided to get greedy with the leaseholds and start to then build up the ramping costs every month. And then, of course, you add in the Grenfell factor as well, whereby every building had to have its safety certificate for fire safety. And then lenders wouldn't lend on them because they didn't want to do their job and assess the risk and then lend the money. So you've got flats not as popular as they were for all of those various reasons. And what's interesting is Michael Gove was the one that said he was going to reform leasehold, but it's all gone quiet.
Yes, the thing is gone quiet to a large extent, Paul, is because they stopped, nobody building at this moment in time because everybody's just holding back. And there are bigger and other issues that are on the table that they can't solve, let alone start talking about leasehold reform. It's the same as other subjects which will probably come up onto a bit later on. All of these things are all very well to discuss, but if you can't get your house in order first with the basics, you can't keep telling somebody else it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. And the lease situation, I agree to a large extent that it does need a reform. It is quite archaic, but that's only going to happen for new build. It's not happening for existing people, and because currently it's so expensive to build and funding has become amazingly expensive. Lots and lots of developments are on ice. They're just held because they're not in a position to get on with it. They don't know the exit route, for example. It's very well to say we need to build more houses, but people can't afford to buy the ones that they build because borrowing has become expensive. Equally, the challenges of trying to get a mortgage with the cost of living and all the other stuff that comes in has become a very difficult challenge now for people to get a mortgage. So it's a snowball effect as to where it's actually going to happen. And I just think that at the moment they're not quite sure where it is. And I'm sure before we know it, we'll get another housing minister coming because it's just a job that's been pushed around.
Absolutely, and of course, if you do want to go and become a freeholder, if you're a leaseholder, of course, nowadays you're going to have to set up a company whose membership will be all the other owners in the block of flats, however many that is. You're going to likely need a management company to look after all the statutory obligations, the onerous fire and safety regulations that now exist. You've got to maintain the lifts, the roof, the common areas, the common entry systems, the security, common area cleaning, common area lighting, just to name a few. And it's never really been more difficult, has it? So even if you want to go and become freehold to avoid the unnecessary costs of leasehold and fully own the building, you've got a huge amount of work on your shoulders to do that these days.
And that's all fair and well, but half of the things are never done by the management company. You are just on a statutory charging cost, and that's why these things cause a problem, because sometimes you ask yourself, what did they actually do for the last year to my block of flats? And I'm getting these exorbitant service charges and costs and insurances and fire safeties and all those sort of things. But, did they actually physically do anything? And 9 times out of 10, they don't, because it's an annual thing. They might do it once in a year. and the rest of the time they're sitting back. But the payments are a monthly thing. So some places in town, I say in town in London, are probably anything between £3,000 and £10,000 a year just in service charges, let alone whatever the mortgage is going to be on top, and then the rates and so forth.
Well, it remains to be seen, Joe, what's done about the broken housing model in the UK. It's extraordinary that he's actually come out and said it when his party's been responsible for it for at least the last 12 years and arguably started the problem in the first place. But not that we try to get too political on here. That's not our intention. And I suppose there's one truism, isn't there, Joe, actually, when you think about it? The more the state gets involved in anything, the more it seems to get messed up. And you could talk about that with the railways back in the day, a nationalisation of all of our major things like steel and coal back in the day. So let's just try and, for the purposes of balance, just say that whenever the state gets involved, it always seems to get messed up. Anyway, we wanted to talk about something that's quite important for buy-to-let landlords, because we talked about this net zero targets for 2025 and 2028. Well, it seems like, and this is again due to the fact there's been absolutely nothing been said about it recently, and I suspect probably they've got bigger fish to fry. But what they're saying now is that landlords must hit those targets or they'll face a ban on letting properties. But at the same time, they've extended the deadline for both, whether it be a new let or an existing let, to 2028. So that's brought a little bit of breathing time. But landlords failing to comply with these new rules when they finally are released will they'll be fined £30,000. So during the tail end of 2021, the government consulted on the tightening of the rules, which would require landlords to ensure all their properties got to an EPC rating of C rather than the current rating of E. Under the original proposals, the change would be enforced from 2025 for new tenancies and from 2028 for existing ones. But with no major updates since the consultation ended 2 years ago, the newspapers reported this week that the 2025 date will be dropped and replaced with a new deadline of 2028, giving landlords an extra 3 years to raise their ratings where needed. Once implemented, up to 2 million landlords could reportedly be facing having to increase their EPC rating. That's a lot of people having to go and buy a lot of DIY equipment.
Well, yes, I'd welcome the extra 3 years that they're talking about, because there's just absolutely no way that this is going to happen by 2025, even if they was to set it up now. There are several things that are going to cause us a problem here. First is actually finding the workers that are going to help you put these situations together, i.e. the DIY chaps who are already flooded with work. I mean, you try and get a hold of an electrician or a plumber or any of those people in the current state of affairs. It's impossible for them to actually turn around and say, well, I've got to upgrade the electric, I've got to upgrade the windows, I've got to upgrade this, I've got to upgrade all of these things to bring it to EPC C standard in that time for all those people is going to be extremely challenging. Of course, the second part of that is the cost. And the cost part of it, so they're easy to throw out £30,000 worth of fine if somebody doesn't do it. And if so, the loser in this, to a large extent, is the landlord, because first of all, he's got to get the property vacant in order to do the works to bring it up to scratch, and secondly, he's going to lose money, whether it's 2, 3, or 4 month period, depending on his work and workload, of no income coming in for that property. So he's going to have to pay for that from their own pocket. So it's a void period of 3 or 4 months. The cost of it on top of it, and of course compliance. And if it doesn't comply, then they can't rent it. So again, the government is having a great go at the buy-to-let market, and a good percentage of people that are in buy-to-let, especially in older properties, are trying to exit as quickly as they can, primarily because it's come to a point where it's just not a viable proposition anymore. What the government has failed to understand in this situation is that the more people come out of the buy-to-let, the private sector, the more people that are going to be on their doorstep looking for a home, which they can't provide because, funny enough, they haven't built enough homes. So, they're shooting themselves in the foot in pretty much every possible way at this moment in time. And I can't see how that is. But the only part of this particular point I'm going to say is that I'm glad to see that they're considering a 3-year extension, because that might give some leeway.
Yeah, I mean, let's not lose the bigger picture here. Obviously, it's good for the planet for all the buildings in this country to be up to scratch, and it's also going to mean lower bills for the people living in them, of course, and also for anyone who's just doing their house up in general and getting the EPC rating up. But what's interesting is the points that's been made that the Energy Efficiency Task Force has just been assembled, so they've got the people to do the job now. But they're also suggesting that they might actually look at the EPC methodology itself, because it may not be fit and accurate enough for purpose as it stands at the moment with just this A to E or whatever it is rating system. They maybe need to get things a little bit more sophisticated with all of these new technologies coming in to make homes greener.
Yeah, I think the more technology we bring into it, the more we probably dig a hole for ourselves. It's bad enough trying to get from A to C, Paul, let alone B to C, D, and F, and then trying to get some clever clog to say that it's going to now be, you don't even make C, because they've got AI, artificial intelligence, now coming in to say that you're not even standing in the wrong place or the right. It's it's going to go bonkers. Just get the basics. If you can't get the basics, we can't even get to the technology part of it. And the basics are simple. We need to get to C. Yes, it's great for the environment, but if you're going to have enough properties to rent out and people are going to be sitting on the street, I don't think that's going to be particularly good for the environment either. I'm sure you'll find that people will start investing in caravans and pulling up in lay-bys and saying, okay, well, I'll just sit here. And I don't think that would be particularly good for the environment. So, I don't think that they're actually seeing the clearer picture that it could cause. And, making the mess is easy. Tidying it up is even harder. And at the moment, they will do a great job of making a mess, but I'm not sure that they'll tidy it up in time. So I think they really need to think about, what they want to do in the long term. But immediately, from a buy-to-let landlord's point of view, and for clients that are buy-to-let landlords, they want to exit for a number of reasons. Taxation is huge. Policies and laws and all these things that are coming in are just not making it viable for them to continue. I get the fact with rogue landlords. I get the fact that they've got to clamp down on people that are putting 6 or 7 families or 6 or 7 people into a 3-bedroom house. And all. I get that. That is fair. But just general stuff is just complete and utter waste of time and energy. That is, and probably moving people out of that industry, out of those investments, which we could desperately do with, in order to make and provide the appropriate housing for the people that are desperately needed in the housing.
Yeah, they make the point that most of the stock, or a lot of the stock that needs to be looked at, is pre-1960s, and a lot of the terrace building at that time had literally one brick wall between the different terrace buildings. So actually putting in a cavity wall insulation is literally going to be quite problematic, to say the least. And to do all of this work in 5 years, many people think is just too fast a move. But it will be interesting to see how well this goes on, and whether in fact we do actually have to have it by 2028, or whether it'll move another 3 years. I just thought we'd finish on, as it's been a fairly heavy show today, Joe, with the stories, but I just thought we might finish with something a little bit more fun. This was spotted in the week. This is a 4-bed property in Wales, and it's attracted some unwanted attention because house hunters were left surprised at how close the bathroom was to the master bedroom, dubbed the weirdest feature ever, as it's inside the same room, just a few steps from the bed. So you'll be pleased to know that I do have a photograph of it, and here is the said bathroom. This is on with Davis & Sons estate agents who are managing the sale of the property. They say they've removed the images from the listing because of trolls, leaving prospective purchasers with an unexpected surprise when they view the property in person. The open plan ensuite includes a toilet fitted at the foot of the bed, and because there is no partition screen, those using the toilet are in full view of anyone else in the bathroom. I guess when you're married, you tolerate just about everything, but is that going too far, do you think, Joe?
No, I don't think so. I think it's very intimate in the grand scheme, and it's good when married couples can share all of their lives together. And I think the builder has demonstrated this very well obviously the way the modern world is now working. I mean, if we're sharing everything else, why not share the rest of it? But I do believe that. It will be a bit of a challenge after the fella has had probably about 9 or 10 pints the night before out on a binge. It would be somewhat noisy, to say the least, which may not be as comfortable and perhaps as intimate as one would like. But look, these things are great. I mean, what they have done here is got us all talking about it. So maybe the flip side of this is that. By doing this, the builder might sell it, and yes, it probably just needs a door on there, but it's certainly got everybody talking about it, and we're having a talk about it. And I don't want to sort of really say, but poo happens, doesn't it? I mean, it's gonna be the case. So I think whoever buys it will have to decide whether they want to put ventilation or just leave it open plan.
The agents are a little bit upset, I think, by the reaction, or surprised maybe by the reaction. They said that I'm sure a married couple has seen lots of things before between them anyway, and everyone has their own taste. It might not be everyone's desire, but it would be easily rectified. You can easily put a wall or a screen up, which is amazing why they didn't do that in the first place. It's not the be-all and end-all, they said. Commenting about sitting and watching your partner on the loo is one thing, but the actual bathroom itself is good quality and done to a high standard. That sounds like an agent, doesn't it? And it hasn't been an issue for people that have been interested in seeing the property. Well, I don't believe that for one moment. They're probably so surprised they've gone home and talked about it in the car all the way home. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you to lighten up the mood. Hope you enjoyed that. And Joe, thank you so much indeed for all your wisdom each week. It's always welcome. And of course, we'll be back for another Property Matters this time next week.